My Uncle Scott and Aunt Jolene keep a fairy in a jar. I've never seen her before because she lives on the top shelf in the wooden hutch, which I could never reach. I remember when I was little, and I would beg and beg Scott and Jolene to let me take a peek inside and wave at her. I thought she must have been so lonely and bored in there, all alone. They would laugh, and Scott would do that thing I hate, where he wraps his hand around my scalp and tries to ruffle my hair, but it's closer to rattling my skull. And Jolene would squat to my level, take a strand of my hair, and tuck it behind my ear. She would say something along the lines of this: "Marcella, fairies are extremely shy. She likes to be alone. But I'll tell her you said hello." It took me a moment when I was small to realize that not every family has a fairy in a jar. My squeals of excitement to my teachers and friends branded me an active imagination comment on my report card. When the laughs and encouragements turned to eye rolls and whispers around the start of 5th grade, I cried to my guardians. They told me that not everyone is as lucky as us to have such a gift passed down from generations. That my great-great-grandfather unearthed her from her home in a great oak tree, put her in a jar he used for raspberry preserves, and harnessed her magic for the rest of his time, before passing her down to his kin. Scott and Jolene told me that the fairy is why I live in the gated community on Rosewater Road, and have a pool in the backyard with a waterfall. Every damn thing was because of that fairy. From the trash being picked up on time Wednesday morning, to the dreams Scott had to sell his stock right before it crashed. I, too, was apparently blessed by her gifts, with my clean bill of health and stellar grades. Fairies, they said, have magic running through their veins, seeping through their pores, pouring out of their ears by the gallon, and that magic is what gives us a good life. So much magic, in fact, that there is no way the fairy could keep it all to herself. Like a dog that sheds, a fairy's magic will seep from her skin, anxious to be harvested by whatever being may come across it. Therefore, they said, the relationship between a fairy and her human caretakers is one of utmost intimacy and mutual respect. When we provide the fairy with a home and an outlet for all of that unsettled magic boiling up inside of her, we in return get her gifts. That's what Scott and Jolene said, anyways. I am 17 now, and I have learned to stop asking questions about the fairy in the jar. The fairy does her thing, and I do mine, and as long as I let her be in that wooden hutch, I get what I want, from great grades to shiny hair to a hot boyfriend and everything in between. The one thing I didn't have was my acceptance from Yale. Elizabeth Clark is a fucking two-faced bitch. God. She told me she wasn't even applying. Fuck her and her greasy horsehair and her stupid sweatshirt. Fuck her stupid cotton candy vomit nails. God, fuck it all. Rachel sighs on the other end of the phone. Mark, you're spiraling again. Think about the other great schools you got into. Northeastern, NYU, Johns Hop. I cut her off. It's not Yale. I don't understand what Elizabeth fucking Clark has that I don't, other than herpes and an accordion folder. Another sigh on the line. Marcella, I know how much you wanted. I was a shoo-in. God, she took my spot. Stop it. Rachel let out a slow exhale. I can't keep doing this with you. No matter how much I try and reassure you, nothing works. You didn't get in. It happens. She's right. Rachel always is, which I can count on her to level me out. The fairy gave me Rachel in the beginning of 7th grade, and we've been inseparable since. Sure, she's a prude, and a little bit strange, with a promise ring from Claire's wrapped around her finger, and a horribly cringy Doctor Who backpack, but she's always right. I know these things, but my temper is short, and my need for reassurance is skyrocketing. Fuck you, Rachel. I spit into the phone. You wouldn't understand. You hardly got into a state school. Pause. Her voice on the other end is cold and short. You're a spoiled brat, Marcella. You know that. One day you won't have your silver spoon and platter, and when that day comes, you're absolutely fucked. Click. My fingers are shaking. With Scott and Jolene asleep upstairs, I remove my shoes and slowly step on the chair I placed in front of the hutch, wobbling a moment to catch my balance and steadying myself, eyes fixed on the artfully crafted cabinet. I know, fairies are shy, but I wouldn't be doing this if I had another option. I'm not going to Yale. My best friend hates me. I've never encountered qualms like these in my life, and if this damn fairy is lacking her magic touch, it's about time I know about it. One breath, then two. My fingers wrap around the handle, and I pull the cupboard open, bracing myself for the delicate creature on the other side. In my youth, I had pictured fairies to be beautiful. I had a vision of Tinker Bell, with her blonde locks and leafy green dress, and little white cotton puffs on the toes of her shoes. I pictured wings with swirly, sparkly patterns that caught the light when they fluttered. I pictured anything except for what was in the jar. She, looks more like a raisin than anything else. She's shriveled and pruny, and her skin is a sickly grey, almost translucent. She's curled in fetal position at the bottom of the jar, with slender fingers wrapped around her knees. Bones almost pierce through her thin flesh, with every rib prominent. Whatever wings she may have had looks partially ripped from her flesh, with black stringy cartilage peeking through the tear. They lay beside her, hanging from her back by a thread, not quite translucent, but almost like a thin layer of glue. Her whole body seems to pulse alongside her heartbeat. The odour coming from the jar strikes me, and I immediately start to gag, spinning my body away from the hutch and pushing my palms against my thighs. It smells like nothing short of death. As my eyes begin to water, I ready myself on the chair, slap my hand over my nose, and turn back around, willing my eyes to focus on the fairy again. Small as she is, the smell is so overpowering that I had the urge to slam the hutch shut again and pretend this whole thing never happened. Jesus Christ. The thing looked like a wounded animal. As she groggily comes to realize my presence, she stands, wobbling on skeletal legs, and stumbles to the front of the jar, hands pressed against the glass. Her wings drag behind her on the floor, connected to her body by the black cartilage that leaves a trail of fluid in its wake. I see her face, with gaunt cheekbones and cracked lips, caked in blood. Her eyes are dull and blue, like heavily saturated denim. Hi. Pause. Can you hear me? Nothing, but her eyes are locked on mine. Listen, I think something's wrong with your magic. I sputter, choking on the pungent, thick cloud of decay filling the air. It's not working anymore. Her legs are shaking under her. She falls to her knees, slowly. I clear my throat. Are you, okay? I reached out and take the jar off the shelf, willing myself to look closer. She seems nauseous by the movement, and clutches her stomach, dry heaving. I wince for her. Listen, it might help you to get some fresh air, okay? What if I open this jar up and let you out? Slowly, I screw open the cap and lay the jar on its side on the shelf, watching her crawl on her hands and knees out of the jar and onto the wood. Again, she stands. She is bald and naked, shaking like a leaf, but she moves her mouth in something that resembles a smile. I try and smile back, growing accumulated to the smell. Listen, fairy, about Yale. My voice catches in my throat, because the fairy just threw herself off of the fucking ledge. I stumble to catch her, but to no avail, as I wobble on the chair, jumping off and onto the floor. The fairy lands in a heap on the hard wood. There is a small thud as her head slams against the ground, and a crack. She is now staring at the ceiling, dark blood pooling behind her head, conglomerated and sticky. She is no longer pulsing. The cartilage attaching her body and wings has broken, fraying like electric wires, and her wings lay beside her, still. The fucking fairy just killed itself. The fairy in my family for generations just dove off the top of the shelf like a fucking Olympic sport. Panicking, I grab a paper towel off the counter and scoop her up like you would a dead bug on the carpet and drop her back into the jar. I grab another paper towel and wet it lightly, cleaning the glob of blood off the hardwood. Catching my breath, I place the jar back on the shelf, close the hutch, and scurry out of the kitchen. I wake in the morning to screaming and rush down the stairs. Jolene is crying, Scott is shouting, and on the counter is the fairy jar. I step forward to gaze at its contents. There is no fairy corpse, no god-awful deadly smell, but the jar is not empty. 2 severed fingers, one adorned with a cheap promise ring, the other with a nail coloured cotton candy pink. As Jolene throws herself onto the ground moaning, a small smile graces my lips. When's the deposit due for Yale, anyhow?
Hello listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please check out the author in the description. For more content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more sinister readings.